Pip visited Miss Havisham, wearing his new clothes. He told her that he had been given a fortune since he last saw her. She told him that he would have a good life ahead of him. She advised him to follow Mr. Jagger's advice. He felt that she was his secret benefactor. Mr. Jaggers told him that he was to be educated in London by Mr. Matthew Pocket, one of Miss Havisham's relatives. After meeting Joe, his sister and Biddy, he felt as though the whole world was waiting for him. Mr. Jaggers' clerk, Mr. Wemmick, told him to wait. Mr. Jaggers, who was still at work. He was sad that he left the blacksmith's. Mr. Jaggers said that Pip should go to his lodgings at Barnard's Inn, where he would share rooms with Mr. Matthew Pocket's son. He wanted to take him to his father's house in a few days' time, so that he could meet his new teacher. Mr. Jaggers gave him some money. Pip felt happier and agreed to go to his lodgings with Mr. Wemmick. Mr. Matthew Pocket lived in Hammersmith, 5 miles away. When they came to Barnard's Inn, Pip was disappointed. It looked dusty and gloomy. Mr. Wemmick left him at the door. He thought that no one would come and let him in, but after about half an hour, Herbert Pocket, was the pale young man, asked him in. He apologized as he went to buy fruits. Pip had a strange feeling that he would never become rich. Pip discovered from Herbert that Mr. Jaggers was Miss Havisham's lawyer. Mr. Jaggers suggested that Herbert's father, Mr. Matthew Pocket, should be his teacher in London. Pip was convinced now that Miss Havisham was his secret benefactor. Herbert told Pip when Miss Havisham was young, she and her half-brother had inherited a fortune from their father. Her half-brother spent. After they showed Pip his room, they introduced him to 2 other young men who were also staying there. Startop was good-natured, but Bentley Drummle was proud and grumpy. Pip learned how to live like a young gentleman, and improving his education because he would be very rich one day. Mr. Jaggers gave him more money. He noticed, however, that Jaggers never laughed. One day, while waiting in Mr. Jaggers' office, Pip had a conversation with Mr. Wemmick about Mr. Jaggers' work. I noticed that Mr. Wemmick was proudly wearing a ring. Pip was invited to Mr. Wemmick's house. Mr. Wemmick told him that all of London's criminals were afraid of Jaggers, so they left him alone. Pip learnt that Mr. Jaggers did not even lock his house at night, and often said he wanted to see the man who'd dare to rob him. Pip was invited to dinner at Mr. Jaggers' house with Herbert Pocket, Startop, and Bentley Drummle. Mr. Jaggers lived in a large, gloomy building. There was plenty for everyone to eat and drink, and Mr. Jaggers served them himself. He asked Pip about Drummle. Mr. Jaggers liked the look of him. He talked to Drummle for a long time, and Pip heard Drummle boasting that he was much stronger than Startop and Pip. They were both annoyed, and Startop and Pip began to show that they had the best skills. Mr. Jaggers seemed to enjoy their talk as a form of entertainment. But Pip didn't enjoy it at all. A woman got more food, and she was worried that Mr. Jaggers would say something bad about the food. He introduced her as Molly, his housekeeper. He asked her to show them her wrists. She pulled up her sleeves and showed them her wrists. One of her wrists had terrible scars on it. Mr. Jaggers had never met a man or a... Dear Mr. Pip, I am writing to you at the request of Mr. Joe Gargery to let you know that he is going to be in London and would be very glad to see you. He will arrive at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and hopes that this will be a good time for you. I am sure that you will be happy to see him because you always had a good heart. Your poor sister is much the same as when you left. We talk about you every day and think about what you are saying and doing. Yours sincerely, Biddy. Pip wished that Biddy could pay Joe not to come. He was my friend, but he was ashamed of him now. Pip didn't want to introduce him to everyone there. Joe arrived at his lodgings. Joe arrived at his lodgings. He seemed anxious not to do or say the wrong thing. Pip was annoyed as Joe called him sir. Joe told him that Miss Havisham wanted to see him and know that Estella came home. Pip was sorry that he was so unfriendly to Joe. Pip hurried outside, hoping to call him back, but it was too late. He decided to go home the following day. He decided to stay in a hotel near Miss Havisham's house. As Pip was waiting to leave London on the coach, he saw two convicts standing nearby. They wore leg irons and handcuffs. Their guard had a gun. He recognized one of the convicts immediately. It was the man who had given him a shiny new coin at the village inn. He hoped that he would not recognize me. The two convicts and their guard climbed up, sitting just behind Pip. One of the convicts said when he was about to leave prison, another convict, Magwitch, asked him to find a boy who had helped him, years before, when he escaped and hid on the marshes. Magwitch didn't know Pip,